Shut up and sit down.
Matt, as you were racing, did you have Metallica in one ear, pretty much the constant, and your crew in the other ear? Or how was that? Because I got on 41 today up here in the Green Bay area, and I put in my AirPods and hit Metallica on Pandora. And I got to be honest, I drove different. It was just different.
Ironically, once we had the kids, it's whatever they were watching in the morning in the motorhome or listening to is what would get stuck in my head, unfortunately. So I had a lot of like Dora the Explorer and just random stuff stuck in my head sometimes when you're driving, unfortunately. But you're right. Some of that stuff, like I used to never listen to music when I ran. And then on some of my training runs, I started listening to music, and Five Finger Death Punch, for instance, is worth about 25 seconds a mile. I don't know how it's sustainable, but it's worth that without feeling like it's any more effort. I'm like,
wow, drove different. Gotta be honest.
Yeah. Is there a spot in the state somewhere where you find that you need to use most of your professional driving skills?
No, I mean the driving too fast. I don't really run into that. I like it when nobody's holding me up on a 4-lane or whatever. But yeah, there is some places where people pay no attention to the speed limit at all, for sure.
So for you, we should define what's too fast. Like, I don't know, is that a thing?
Well, I mean, I don't really speed much, to be honest with you. However, when we're going down an interstate or something like that, I usually judge off other cars. I love it when somebody's going too fast because I'll get behind them and I'll let them go 1 mile an hour faster than I am. So then I figure, well, if they get a ticket, somebody gets a ticket, he's going to get it. He's going a mile an hour faster than me. So I actually like when people are going fast like that. I don't like to be the fastest one.
Matt, let's go back to the small track days, right, where it all began. We did some research, and I literally couldn't find a small track that you didn't race on back in the day. Did you ever race at Jefferson Speedway other than all the others? I mean, tell us about the beginning.
Yeah, so I guess if you want to go way back, my dad's 3 brothers raced at Jefferson Speedway. That was the closest track to our house. And we used to stop over their house. My dad didn't race at the time. And we used to stop over at their house all the time. And I just loved race cars from a young age. We'd go over there and I always ask my dad, after work if we could drive over to either Uncle Gary or Butch's house, because they were in Cambridge. Wayne was in Janesville, which was farther away. So we'd go over to one of their house, and just because we knew they'd be out in the garage working on their race cars. And I was like going over there and watching that. And then Saturday nights we'd sit up on the hill at Jefferson with my grandparents, and my aunts would be up there watching my uncle's race, and my cousins would be up there and stuff. So just kind of started doing that and hanging out, and just that's kind of where it all started. And then one year after the championship race, we were driving home, and my dad did a U-turn and went back to the track. I kind of asked him what he was doing. He said he was going to go back and buy a race car. And my dad was real funny. He's like, I'm going to buy it there. I'm going to have him drop it off at the house because I don't trust him not to take good parts off or change the setup or whatever he thought they were going to do. So anyway, he went and bought a car right out of the pits after the last race, and the guy dropped it off at our shop. And we didn't have any tools. Neither one of us knew how to work on anything. We didn't have a trailer. We didn't have anything. And I was 12 or 13 at the time. And really, that's where it all started. We went to local farm fleet and bought a jack and some jack stands and a toolbox, and started buying some tools here and there. And I pretty much did all the work on the car, and my dad drove it for the first few years until I turned 16. Then I got a car, and we both raced at the same time for a little while. But that's kind of where it all started, was Jefferson Speedway. Actually, when I started racing at Columbus Speedway, which isn't there anymore. And because that was a Friday night, then my dad would race Saturday nights at Jefferson, so I could work on his car.
Wow, it's fun.
I remember as a kid, they had the Pabst Red, White, and Blue series. They went to Seymour. I remember going to that, Kaukauna, places like that. Yeah. What is it about those tracks that, because once you've been to the highest level, right, and you go to Daytona, and there's a whole week there, and you talk about travel, and there's haulers and shops and sponsor commitments, right? You're at the high end of the food chain. And I worked in Tulsa for many years, and you'd get many of these top drivers because they just want to come and race the Chili Bowl Nationals. And they'd go, it's just cool to be on this short track with the dirt, and we're just having the time of our life. What is it about those places that is it just straight nostalgia? But what does it draw guys back to that even if you've won the Daytona 500, there's something just a hoot about going back and racing in those kind of places?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of about how you started. Maybe typically what your dad brought you to as a kid is the kind of racing that you end up doing or that you enjoy the most or whatever. My dad and my uncles and stuff are all around late model asphalt racing. So that's kind of where I started as well. So for me, when I watched the big races before I was driving, like the Slinger Nationals, and you'd always see NASCAR drivers come there and race at the Slinger Nationals. I mean, that was like the coolest thing ever. You go sit in the stands, and I've seen so many great drivers. I was there, I think, that night that Neil Bonnet had that big crash, and like I've seen Bobby and Davey Allison, and obviously Schrader and Kwiecki, and like Michael Waltrip, just all kinds of guys I've seen race there. Trickle, obviously, a million times. So watching that, and then along with all the short track legends like Joe Shear and Rich Bickle and all the guys that were doing so well up there, to me, that was always like the coolest thing ever watching that. So as soon as I was able to start racing and moved up to super lights, I always look forward to the Slinger Nationals. That just seemed like it was the biggest short track race in Wisconsin, and really awesome racetrack, but just the whole event and the atmosphere and all the people that would come there for it and all the people that have heard of it. I mean, that was always for sure my local short track race, or favorite short track race rather.
Matt, where was your first win here in Wisconsin? What track was it? And how old were you when you got your first victory?
It was at Columbus 151 Speedway, and I think it was my third night racing. We won the feature up there. So I was 16, and I say this almost every interview, and I still don't know where it is. It's pretty funny. I forget when I get off this, but for like the last 10 years, whenever I talk about my first win, I always talk about the tape of it, because my dad had this old camera. It was this big old VHS camera, holding it up on his shoulder. And he filmed the race. And it's really, really neat because he's so excited that the camera jumps up to the sky and back down. And he's laughing and giggling and saying, "Oh, the kid is better than I am." And he's so excited, just so excited. It's like the neatest thing. And I need to hunt that tape down, actually. So it was at Columbus 151 Speedway. And it was like my third night out there. And I was able to hold off Dave Phillips and Pete Moore, who were the two best guys around that track at the time. So it was their late model division. It was kind of like a late model stock or sportsman type car, but it was the late model division out there at like Columbus Jefferson type late models.
When do you get the feel that if you're a football player, right, and you start running for 3,000 yards, like, oh, maybe I can do this in college, or since I'm a runner, if you see some guy and you go, oh, look, he just laid down in high school a 4:20 mile, you think I might have a future in this. When do you realize as a racer that you might have some ability and some opportunity, and this can be a career, as opposed to those guys that what's 80% of them that you raced when you first started out that just like to have a car and like to race and go there on weekends, but it goes from a hobby and you've made a career out of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a simple answer. That's kind of a tricky question. I've never really had. It's gonna sound a little dumb, but I've never really had that feeling like I'm good enough. Like hey, I'm better than that guy. I'm gonna make it at this. Like, I think a lot of it is circumstance. I think a lot of it's certainly dedication, and I hate to ever call racing work, but I think dedication and hard work and being dedicated to try to do the best you can do or best you can be at something. But a lot of it is just great timing and good fortune, meeting the right people. The Risers giving me a chance to drive their car. Mark Martin seeing me race and getting Robbie and I hooked up to Roush Racing to move up, like without any of those kind of things happening, or driving the short track cars Dad and I couldn't afford, for like Mike Butts and Fred Nielsen and those kind of guys. Without getting those cars and running well, you would never have got the experience or the recognition or the next people seeing you drive that thought you were good at it to give you a chance to move up. So ironically, at least the first several years when I raced, I always liked working on race cars better, and I liked driving them. I mean, the driving was fine, but I really enjoyed working on them and trying to figure out how to make them faster than everybody else's cars. Like, I loved working on my dad's car and even my own car. Like, I couldn't wait to go home and try to build a new set of shocks and see if it would make my car turn better than other set of shocks. And so I think very early on, I figured out that the fastest car has a way better chance of winning a race than the best driver. And I really focused on that pretty much my whole career. The last handful of years has been much harder because it's so engineered based, and I can't keep up with it, and I'm not smart enough to tell them, what to put in the cars or what I need in the cars. But I think, at a young age, I learned that, and I enjoyed that, and I embraced that. And I think I took that through a lot of my career. And I think that was a huge advantage for me, because like in practice, we work hard on making changes and getting that last run in and that last run of tests just to try to keep making the car better. Because when you get to that level, everybody's a good driver. Mm-hmm. I really don't think I'm nearly as talented as a lot of the drivers that I raced against for years and years, but I feel like we made our cars better than a lot of those guys, and the faster car would beat a more talented driver more times than not. So I feel like that was probably one of my biggest, one of my best attributes, one of the things that helped me, I think, the most through my career. My driving talent wouldn't have took me there. If I would have never been good at trying to get my cars to go faster, the talent would have never took me there, because we did a lot of that ourselves, and I really enjoyed doing that.
Well, I think you're really self-deprecating in that regard. I think there's plenty of talent there, but along that point, whether it's engineers or mechanics, right, in NASCAR, the goal is always to go faster. And so there are times in that chase for speed that all rules are not observed to the letter. But it is one of my favorite sayings I've ever heard in all of sports. When a guy said, "It's not that we're cheating; we're just trying to get away with stuff." Given that you like to get in there and work on it, like, do you find that you wish they'd kind of take some of those shackles off and just go, listen, if I have more ingenuity than the other guy, then I should be allowed to build a faster race car?
Well, I mean, I think most people probably feel the same way every generation. Certainly for somebody that wants to be hands-on, it's much different. Like right now, it really caters to the kids in a way, honestly, the guys who want to spend time, studying data and going over film and going to the simulator and doing iRacing, and like all that kind of stuff kind of has replaced the old, kind of testing, hey, let's throw this in the car and see what it feels like. Hey, let's try that shock. And, it's kind of, that's sort of what that's morphed into is computers and simulators and all that kind of stuff. So they share data with everybody, so you can look through data all night long if you want. Every night you can look at every single driver's data for every single lap they run on the racetrack, which is just crazy to me. Like, there used to be kind of secrets. Like when I got to Gibbs, Denny was really good he's really good at a lot of tracks, but he was really good at Martinsville and Loudon. And I remember just scouring over all his data to see what he did different. Even the first test I did with Gibbs, we went to Charlotte and we had drastically different driving styles. And we go the same speed. So like he incorporated some of my stuff in one end and I incorporated some of his stuff in the other end. It made us both faster. But the way it is today, like everybody can look at that. So you just, if you're willing to spend the time and like I said, I think it's a really advantage to the younger guys that are used to, video games and going through, data, computers, all that kind of stuff gives them an advantage. So it's definitely changed through the years.
Speaking of drastically different driving styles, have you noticed that people from Illinois drive like assholes on a racetrack too, or is that just for us?
I don't know where he's from. No, I'm just kidding. Man, I don't even know where to go with that one. I mean, there's no good answer on this one.
Yeah, you can let it be if you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This might be safer then, as drastic differences go. Here you are, giant Packer fan, and you're working for Joe freaking Gibbs, who coached the Redskins, the Washington football team, to three Super Bowls. Like that had to come up at some point, like in the interview.
Yeah, well, not really. I'll tell you a couple good stories in football for me. He loves telling football stories, but the thing about Joe when you work for him for a while is he tells. You want to think he tells a lot of football stories. He tells football stories a lot. It's usually the same 5 stories though. But anyway, as you guys will remember very well, the Packer game in Seattle, the NFC Championship game. I happened to be in Las Vegas. We were testing the next day, and I was at the sports book. And coach calls me, and I'm looking at it. He calls me at halftime. I'm looking at it like, man, do I answer this or don't I answer this? I'm sure he's not listening to this. This is okay to say. So anyway, so I answer it. And because I don't want to jinx anything with the game, although I'm not really very superstitious. But he's like, man, your boys look good. They're going to the Super Bowl. You're going to go. And he's going on and on and on. I'm like, man, coach, it's only halftime. Like, I don't know, man. Unless they're up by like 5 touchdowns, I just never think it's over. But yeah, they're looking good. Hopefully they keep going. And then we all know what happened in that game. So
yeah,
he didn't call me after the game. And then the best one was this is funny though. I was the Redskins. The Packers played in Washington for a playoff game a few years back. I don't remember what year it was. Maybe you guys remember. And so Joe was taking a whole bunch of people up there. And Coach has this big old airplane. It holds like 12 people. And he calls me and he's like, hey, I had this airplane I was leasing at the time. And he's like, hey, he didn't call me. He had his guy call me. He's like, hey, Coach needs to use the airplane on Sunday to bring some people up, to the Redskin game. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, sure. I'll let him use that. That's pretty cool. I bet she's going to ask me to go, since he's calling to use an airplane to go up there. And so I'm sure he's going to ask me to go. That's going to be pretty cool, I was wrong on that. I filled it up with everybody and took it up there and took it back. And I was like, I saw him on Monday. I was like, man, how was the game? I mean, besides, I know your team got crushed, but how was the game besides that? Like, oh, it was great. And I was like, yeah, hope everything worked out good with the airplane. I said, it would have been really nice if I could have rode on it, went to the game with you. I think you brought Denny or Kyle or somebody. I don't know. But yeah, I never got the invite.
That is terrific. We're going to spare you. I'm not going to ask you if you think what the Packers should do with Aaron Rodgers, because that's even worse. I think that's more of a powder keg than the Illinois drivers. What's that?
Has anybody covered that? Is there something going on?
No, it made the papers. It was like page 6. If you went in there, it was kind of buried deep. There's a thing. It's not solved. But listen, we usually end the show with a bit of a speed round. I can't think of anything better than to have Matt Kenseth and do a speed round. So take a quick break, and we'll be right back here to wrap things up with Matt Kenseth. Helpful critiques, ideas, great stories, people we should know, the great bar in your town, the fish fry you want to know, the fish boil, anything that you want to reach out to us with. We are happy. We are here. You can be the inputters. We're here to listen.
Shut up and sit down.